What's on your radar, Ryan?
So the New York Times yesterday alerted its readers to what is apparently a brand new phenomenon, namely the central role Dr. Anthony Fauci has acquired in our ongoing partisan jockeying. The Republican war on Dr. Fauci is partly a sign of Mr. Trump's strong grip on the party. But Dr. Fauci, both his friends and detractors agree, has also become a symbol of something deeper: the deep schism in the country, mistrust in government, and a brewing populist resentment of the elites, all made worse by the pandemic, the Times reports. The story goes around the track for another 2,000 plus words or so, and even makes a pit stop in a diner in Columbus, Ohio. No, seriously, they go to a diner in Ohio, where the Times meets a fan of Joe Rogan's podcast. He says, "I think he's done the same thing for 50 years, and he's in bed with all the pharma companies," the Rogan listener observes. He needs to retire. What the story doesn't touch is why the public, or some major portion of it, might have reason to disapprove of the performance of Dr. Fauci. The Times glancingly alludes to one such reason before dismissing it, writing about his run-ins with Rand Paul, quote, "Paul has fueled speculation that COVID-19 was the result of a lab leak produced by federally funded gain-of-function research, high-risk studies aimed at making viruses more infectious in Wuhan, China. Dr. Fauci and other National Institutes of Health officials have said that the Wuhan research did not meet the criteria for gain-of-function studies, and that it is genetically impossible for viruses studied there to have produced the pandemic," unquote. But the claim of genetic impossibility, however, is not possible to be made without knowing the full extent of the viral sequences studied at the Wuhan lab, and the public simply doesn't know more than a few. The public does know, however, that Peter Daszak, head of EcoHealth Alliance, which was performing what many scientists call gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, actively worked to conceal some of that information from a public database, concerned about the attention it could bring to his work in the wake of the pandemic. We also know that a number of scientists warned Fauci in early February 2020 that the virus had many of the hallmarks of a lab, but Fauci pushed back, dubbing such judgments merely fuel for conspiracy theories. So in glossing over or ignoring entirely the legitimate criticisms of Fauci, the Times is both evidence of the political polarization of science that it decries, and it is also contributing to it. It is highly unlikely that the average New York Times reader, as highly educated as they are, is aware, for instance, that new information has emerged that deeply undermines Fauci's early claims that there was no there when it came to a lab leak. Now, it's by no means a slam dunk that the lab was the actual origin, but it is now well within the range of possible scenarios and arguably far more likely than not. The reader might also not know that Paul's claim that Fauci was funding gain-of-function research, despite his denials, is one that is backed up by leading scientists who say the EcoHealth work does fit the criteria for gain-of-function. Now, aside from the lab, Fauci has acknowledged lying to and misleading the public. Early in the pandemic, when protective equipment was in short supply, Fauci told the public not to use masks because they don't work and could even be counterproductive.
Look at the films in China and South Korea, whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
By April, Fauci was urging people to mask up and simply admitted he had lied.
What about a month or so, or 2 or 3 ago, when people were saying, you don't really need to wear a mask? Well, the reason for that is that we were concerned, the public health community, and many people were saying this, were concerned that it was at a time when personal protective equipment, including the N95 masks and the surgical masks, were in very short supply. And we wanted to make sure that the people, namely the healthcare workers, who were brave enough to put themselves in harm's way to take care of people who were infected with the coronavirus and the danger of them getting infected. We did not want them to be without the equipment that they needed. So there was not enthusiasm about going out and everybody buying a mask or getting a mask. We were afraid that that would deter away from the people who really needed it.
It may have been a noble lie, but it was a lie nonetheless. He followed it up in late 2020 with another whopper, admitting to the New York Times that he had been lying earlier when he said that a 70 to 75% vaccine rate could equal herd immunity. Quote, when polls said only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%. Then, when newer surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought, I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80, 85. We need to have some humility here. We really don't know what the real number is. I think the real range is somewhere between 70 to 90%, but I'm not going to say 90%. That was in an interview with New York Times science reporter Donald McNeil, who was later pushed out of the Times over a controversy that involved him offending a group of wealthy high school students on an overseas field trip with an explicit use of the N-word in a discussion about the use of the N-word. And so, in some ways, what else can you expect from New York Times readers other than just complete confusion at why 60% of the country thinks that Fauci is doing a poor job, if they haven't kind of been read in. Now, they should remember, say, early 2020, because Fauci's argument that you don't need masks was a pretty big one. Millions and millions of people saw that and listened. But otherwise, New York Times readers might just simply not know that there's new information around the origin of the coronavirus out of the lab that has emerged that has made that credible. They might not know, about many of the criticisms that people have. A lot of it is cultural. A lot of it's just Team Trump is not going to like Fauci or whatever. But you should at least understand what the rational basis is for it.
Yeah, I think there's so much deification of Fauci in Team Blue circles. There's so much buy-in to the idea that he is the pandemic hero. We need a hero. We need someone to believe in, it's comforting to think, yes, there's this great guy, and he's really smart, and he's the best guy, and he's an expert. He's been doing this for so long, and he's in charge of fixing this, so it's going to get fixed. And that's not true. It's at best, it's more complicated than that. And I think that's hard for people. I think that's not a left-right thing. That's not a red-blue thing. It can be hard to lose faith in people that you're really, especially if you've wrapped a whole political identity into the idea that they're perfect or that they're great. Yeah. I mean, this is the right's problem with Trump. Right. But there's just a version of this in all political tribes that, well, our guy's great, right? You're making this up. I'm not hearing you. I'm not listening. That's misinformation. That's lies. And I think that's what protects Fauci in these circles.
And I think at this point, what Biden does about Fauci is a purely political question. Midterms, re-election. Whether he stays or whether he retires comes down to politics. And I think there actually is a political argument that Fauci retiring could be a way to not say, because no party ever wants to say they were wrong about anything. So the way that he could retire would be to say, we won, mission accomplished.
Right, which is what he said he will do. He said he will go when COVID-19 is defeated, and no sooner.
Right. Now, it's never going to be completely defeated as far as I can imagine.
Now, we have to get that vaccine rate up past 120, 150%. Then once we're 180% vaccinated.
But if we can get back to a place where case counts are low, where hospitals are taking people for normal procedures.
Yeah, we're there, baby. We're basically there.
Then you could see Fauci say, you know what? I'm riding off into the sunset, a conquering hero. And that would allow Democrats then to send him off into retirement and then kind of celebrate him on the way out, never have to reckon with everything that happened over the last couple of years.
You are seeing, and we're probably going to talk about more of this later in the show, but it feels to me like a dam has broken among people. Maybe we actually even mentioned this yesterday. I can't recall. Days all run together. Dr. Leanna Wen, the CNN medical analyst, she's now saying things. It sounds like me. It sounds like me talking. Right. She's saying, no, we need to get back to normal. This needs to be at the level of individual choice. No more government requirement for masks. Masking kids is harmful. Time to stop this. Now she says the science has changed and we can now do this. I'm not really sure what's actually changed in the last 6
Just
months.
go with it.
But fine, I'll take it. I'll take it. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right?
And I think Fauci, in some ways, is a victim of his ability to create the cult of personality in the sense that it's now very hard for him to roll back some of the precautions that he had, laid out as so life and death. And when the CDC moved from its 10-day to 5-day quarantine rule, and there was suggestion that they had done it because of public pressure and because of the airlines and other, the liberals freaked out on them for it. Like, how dare you? Like, we want the 10. So he's kind of stuck.
50. Give us the 50.
Yeah, give us the
8.
50.
Yeah.
Give us all quarantine. And so he's kind of stuck in that place where his base of support is liberals. Liberals wanted that 10-day quarantine rather than the 5. He goes down to 5. He's never going to win back the right of the country. Like, they're gone. Like, they want him in prison. And if he loses half of the liberals, that's how he goes from approval rates in the 40s to approval rates in the 20s and 30s.
I think the huge mistake the public health establishment made was reintroducing mask mandates and other things after saying, no, get vaccinated, then you can be done. Obviously, we had Delta and Omicron, but those things caused more cases. They did not cause, for the most part, more deaths and hospitalizations if you had vaccination.
Right.
You had more of it where you had low vaccination, but that did not change. It should have still made vaccination the drive. And
Right.
I think it got confusing for people at that point, or people said, oh, well, I'm going to get it anyway. This isn't really helping. Why is it doing this?
Right. If I still have to wear the mask, then it must not work.
Yeah.
The benefit that you could have gotten from saying you get the vaccine, you get to go back to your normal life. Let's say you get an extra 5 or 10% vaccine rate out of that. That far outweighs whatever marginal cost there is of some people not wearing masks anymore, because most people are still going to wear masks.
Right.
In
and it
places
didn't matter for Omicron. It didn't matter anyway.
And it wasn't.
It tore through the masked and the unmasked alike.
Yeah, it sure did. Anyway, looking forward to your radar up next.